So I'm trying to get more information about a company known as CSA. They've been doing work on behalf of the Education Department in Puerto Rico. CSA would survey schools to determine whether or not they were structurally sound and safe following Hurricane Maria, and then they'd report back to the Secretary of Education, Dr. Keleher, who would determine whether or not a school could reopen. Friday morning, the staff of the governor of Puerto Rico sent out a news release saying no more CSA. We're not using them. Essentially, it is taking too long to do the work that they're doing, so we're going in a different direction, and we hope to have most schools open by Monday. Then there was a report that came out saying, how exactly did CSA get that contract? Reportedly, the teachers union in Puerto Rico had concerns regarding a conflict of interest with CSA. And so I just want you guys to know that I'm poking around to find out more about the contract, who signed it, how was it agreed upon, and there are some serious questions surrounding all of that. But nonetheless, and more importantly, as importantly, is the reopening of schools in Puerto Rico. And now that the Secretary of Education says they're going in a different direction, and she's only got, by the way, about 72 hours to make this happen in order to open schools on Monday. I just did a pretty lengthy interview with her, and here it is. I've heard from many of you who are, quite frankly, angry and furious that your child's school in Puerto Rico has not been opened yet. Other people have a lot of questions as to what's delaying the reopening of some schools. And just today, the news broke that the Education Secretary in Puerto Rico, Keleher, Dr. Keleher, who is in her first year as the Education Secretary on the island, has fired the company that was used to essentially survey schools to determine if they were ready to reopen. So I've asked the Secretary to join us via FaceTime from San Juan to explain. Dr. Keleher, thank you for your time. Let's start with this. Why did you fire that company?
Well, the order from the governor has been clear from day one. It is a priority that education reopen in schools. There was a need to balance exercising the ethic of care and making sure that we were responsible and knowing the conditions of the schools before we sent people back in there to work. And it was taking too long, and we've decided to change strategy.
What will you do now?
So the new approach is basically a kind of a hybrid. Well, there's three parts to it. We have a list of findings from the visits that were completed. We posted those on our website, and we instituted a process where the school directors can create a letter that says, okay, I've received notice of these conditions in my building. There are these fallen wires. There's the part of the roof is missing. Whatever the case may be, right? There's mold, and they say, I've been notified. This is what I'm doing to temporarily segregate that area or attend to the safety hazard that might represent. I've notified the community. They send me that letter. I certify that letter and send back, and they can open. We're hoping that hopefully all of the 500 schools that are on that list will be able to open by Monday.
And go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The second part is what we're going to do for the remaining around 343 schools. They are either owned by the public buildings or they're owned by or managed by OMEP. And that's like the maintenance division inside the department. So we've asked that they send their staff out today, tomorrow, and Sunday to do a quick check to look for safety hazards. It's not the same thing as having the engineer doing a structural assessment of the physical plant, but it's enough to say we can identify quickly which conditions could represent a hazard, and then they're going to certify those buildings. So if we can get the majority of that 343 done in the next 3 days, plus the letters from the school directors, we should be pretty much 80% or better operating by Monday.
Are you worried about sacrificing safety for speed?
That was a concern before. The concern really, I needed to be responsible to make sure that I'm safeguarding the health and well-being of the people that I'm responsible for. And that includes 340-some thousand children, as well as 31,000 teachers. So I have a duty of care, and I have an ethic of responsibility that requires me to make sure that I'm aware of those conditions in those buildings. It became a little challenging for folks to kind of understand when we would identify things like mold and say, you have mold in your building. We need to do something to remediate that. That's not an okay condition. And people would say, well, we've always had mold, or every house has mold, or the school, and I think just because it's always been bad doesn't mean that when I'm notified of it as a health condition, I'm relieved of my responsibility to notify and to ask that you take the appropriate corrective measures. So I think there was a little bit of like a sort of that dynamic there created a little bit of people didn't understand why I was doing that. But in addition, the information was coming out too slowly. We weren't getting the information quickly enough from those assessments. People couldn't see what was going on. I myself couldn't see what was going on, which left me incredibly frustrated because people need transparency in a process. Otherwise, it creates this sense of distrust. So, that's how we wound up where we are today.
I remember when I first interviewed you in San Juan, you said to me, this may be the best thing to happen to the education system because changes need to be made. In light of that, some people have wondered if you have a plan to consolidate schools and are sort of using the aftermath of the hurricane to do so. I wonder how you would respond to questions and concerns from parents about that.
I would say, in all honesty, I am most definitely taking full advantage of whatever opportunities could exist for Puerto Rico to benefit from federal financial assistance that would allow us to make repairs in our schools. I am doing that in a way that does not conflict or compete with anyone else's interest on the island for opening schools and for getting kids back in school and having teachers teaching. I'm trying to capitalize on the opportunity to document known deficiencies after the passing of a hurricane that will ensure that I provide the best possible conditions for my children to go to school and my teachers to work. In addition to that, we have a financial crisis in Puerto Rico. Everyone knew, and the financial plan was necessary because there's $73 billion worth of debt, and we have to figure our way around that. In May, I closed 167 schools. We created a savings of $7.5 billion just for the operation of those physical plants because we didn't fire any teachers. Now I'm in a situation where if the government is not generating revenue at the rate that it had anticipated because of the storm interrupting normal operations on the island, then that represents a potential loss of income for me of $150 million a month. So I have that reality. I have the reality of the fact that approximately 14,000 students have left the island to go stateside their families decided to move. I have some teachers that have left. And then I have this other interesting fact of almost 200 schools that have less than 150 students. So when you look at the budgets for those schools, you find that if a school has about 76 or 72 students and their budget is $500,000, 92% of that money is going towards salaries, which leaves approximately $50,000 to be able to make purchases and other things. So I kind of have an issue with that. I kind of feel like, given the reduction in the number of students, given the fact that some teachers have left, and I have that kind of inefficiency in the original context of a fiscal crisis, then I'm going to need to look at those schools separately. But that shouldn't be conflated with the issues around identifying schools that have damage to their physical structure and optimizing the amount of money that we can get from the federal government to support that reconstruction.
How many more schools do you think you will end up closing?
It's hard to know a number because I don't have a budgetary target. I'm committed to two things. One, making sure that we have the best physical plants available to our students. And so the 44 that we've been identified as damaged, they're probably not going to reopen given the amount of damage, and those students will be relocated at least temporarily. We could rebuild that building, right? I'm not saying that it would close and go away. And then the other thing I'm committed to ensuring is that we're optimizing how we're using the financial resources that are available to make sure that each child in Puerto Rico receives a quality education, because that is their right. And I am going to be a responsible steward of what has been given to me as the resources that are available to make sure that they have that educational experience.
Finish this statement for me. The best thing to come out of the hurricane for the education system is?
People would say, in the last 2 days, with all of the clamoring that's happening about opening schools, as secretary or someone who looks at this from outside, say, wow, isn't that amazing? People love school. Teachers want their schools open. Parents want their schools open. And there's this unsilenceable voice that says, schools are critical to our functioning, they're critical to our future, and education is important. I think that's a good problem to have. The fact that they want them open, so quickly, given the passing of a Category 5 hurricane, and recognizing that in New Orleans it took 4 months to open 3 schools, that maybe we got to kind of level set. But the best thing to happen is that people are so ready and so hungry to go back to their public schools.
And there have been, for people who are watching this video who don't know, there have been protests in and around the island from parents who are furious that their schools haven't been opened, and many people have been critical of the secretary. Ma'am, let me also ask you to answer this question. What's been the worst thing to education following the hurricane?
What's been the worst thing about the storm? Honestly, the worst thing has been the damage and the devastation that the storm created. People lost everything. Children were terrified when it was coming. Everyone was so anxious, and then they were scared in their homes. I can only imagine what some of those experiences must have been in some of the homes in the more rural areas. And then you wake up the next day, and all your prized possessions are gone. Your life gets changed in the course of 36, 48 hours, and that's heartbreaking. Schools that were completely filled with mud. And up to the roof, you could only see the roof because there was so much water. I mean, I think that's a really hard thing for people to go through. And we've responded with a spirit of indomitable perseverance, and people have come together to try and get everything back to normal as quickly as possible. But that shock to the system was probably the hardest thing.
The National Guard has been instrumental in the distribution of food, water, and other supplies. Are they being utilized by you and your agency at all?
We are. I mean, the National Guard, we are very grateful for the support. General Reyes has been amazing in terms of just asking questions like, is education, what can we do? Very grateful for that. About 3 weeks ago, I think we engaged them. About 3 weeks ago, we engaged them fully for logistical support to make sure that we had control and visibility of the pipeline related to the amount of food that's available in the schools, in the cafeterias, the demand, how much we're producing, and what the storage looks like in the storage warehouses, and then what are the dates for additional food to come from stateside. To be able to replenish. So they've been instrumental in that. And then next week, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as part of this secondary strategy, we're working out a pilot for what reconstruction in some of the more damaged schools could look like with their help.
Give me some ideas.
So that we want to work out the kinks, but we're going to create sort of a cross-functional team that's led by engineers. That'll allow us to have maps and more visuals. It's basically responding to some of the challenges and the lack of visibility that we've been experiencing to date, where we see, if you're going and you're doing something, we got to know what you're doing, what's the timeline, what's it look like. We got to have a good flow of information, and it's got to pop, right? Red, yellow, green. In what places, with what issues, and to try and build something that allows us to be much more agile and much more efficient and effective in terms of making assessments and addressing needs. They say this thing like, find a problem, fix it, or if you see something, do something about it. So, that's more the mentality that we need.
A little bit of red, yellow, green is a little bit of inside baseball for people who are watching. So kind of backtrack and tell us what that means. I mean, I don't know that I quite understood what you meant. So
they had a sample of a map where we looked at, 7 categories by different regions, and if it was red, it was a problem. If it was yellow, it was like more than 50% operational. If it was green, it was fully operational. So the idea that you could very quickly dashboard for folks and let people see, this is what we've identified as the issues, and here we are in terms of addressing them so schools could come back online.
It occurs to me that you're really dependent on the federal government to help with your day-to-day local business. I mean, your boss, the governor of Puerto Rico, has been critical of the Army Corps of Engineers in saying that they need to act with a greater sense of urgency. And I guess determining what schools are ready to be used is also dependent on the federal government. FEMA, by the way, sent out an email a short time ago saying essentially that it's not their job to determine whether schools can be reopened. It's only their job to help assess whether the schools are structurally sound. Have you gotten any pushback from the federal government as you've gone to them and said, guys, pick it up, let's go?
Yeah, I mean, I get that kind of pushback from pretty much everyone I walk into, right? I mean, like that's sort of like that's the conversation of the hour every time we sit down to do something, because I always want to do it, faster and better. So that's sort of standard for my work days. But I think in terms of the response, it's true. They don't make decisions about whether a school could open or not, but they present me with information that allows me to make an informed decision. The issue is if I'm not getting that information quickly enough, if I'm not getting it in complete format, if there are errors, if things need to get changed, I can't operate under those circumstances. I can't. There has to be a sense of urgency. We need to get kids back in school, and I need to be able to know the reasons why, so that some subsequent course of action can be mapped out and other people can be tasked. I mean, this isn't something you just sort of figure out at the end of the day. This is something that minute by minute, as you produce something, people want to know, and it takes time to mobilize resources. So the clarity of the information and the clarity of the need and the specificity becomes very important, because if I need 6 people or I need 16 people, it matters, and that's defined on what problem I'm trying to solve, which is defined by the results of the assessment. So there's a chain effect here that requires a significant amount of due diligence in the planning and fidelity in the execution.
It would seem to me that you share the frustration of parents who are aggravated that it's taking so long.
I do. I mean, there's no one on the island who wants this system to be the best it can be, and for kids to have every opportunity they have to learn than me. I mean, it's a commitment. It's a personal commitment. There's a professional commitment, and it's their right. Right, and so I'm responsible for that. That's something I take very seriously. So they need to be open. The conditions need to be safe. We have to balance that. We have to communicate, and we have to show progress, and we have to be transparent in doing it. Those are all reasonable things. They should be the bare minimum of what the operations that education should be providing to the community. And if I can't do that, then the resources that are around me that are supporting my intention to do that need to be changed.
How many teachers do you believe have left the island and are no longer available to you as instructors?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because it's been very hard to do the whole teacher attendance thing with the lack of electricity. So we're filling out, they're collecting paper forms. To venture a guess, I would say somewhere around 10%, which would be about 3,000. But I think by and large there's a commitment among public school teachers here that they're committed to the island and to public education and to being part of the system. So I don't really think there's a lot.
You've said that 14,000 students have left. How does that affect the system in Puerto Rico?
Well, our student-teacher ratio was off balance anyway if you compared it to what you see in the States and there was a 2017, a couple months ago, I think it came out in August, that IES published a report about what the national tendencies were for student-teacher ratios. And we're not an efficient system. We're a little bit top-heavy because we have a lot of really small schools where your student-teacher ratio is 1 to 12. So that's why you get a situation where you have 150, students, 76 students in a school and a $500,000 budget, and most of it's going to payroll. So, I think we had already embarked on the beginning of a right-sizing mission, and that'll just continue. We got to see where we are when the dust settles, and then make informed decisions about how to consolidate so that students are getting more than their fair share of the available resources.
Is there anything, Dr. Keleher, I haven't asked that you would like to add?
Just maybe a request that folks be patient with the process, and if I could ask for a little bit of trust that I will do right by you, that I have the best of intentions, I am committed to the work, I am giving everything I have to what this mission is for the good of the students of Puerto Rico and the future of the island. So so that they can, I hope that by my actions and who I show myself to be, that people will have confidence in the system, confidence in my leadership, and really start to visualize the kind of public education system we can create.
Thank you for your time.